Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, here with Benji Naesen. As always, this show is supported by our show partner, Cole, who produce performance cycling apparel. Just a Vuelta recap today. We had a TT in Certisit La Vuelta Challenge, which will wrap into tomorrow's episode, as well as just a sprint in Benelux Tour. Today in the Vuelta Stage 19, from Tapia to Monforte de Lemos, transition stage, but a bit hillier than sort of the Stage 19 transition stages you'd see in the Tour de France, 191 Ks long, and they climb for the first 60 Ks, just about. There's 20 Ks of about 5% to open the stage of climbing with a short descent in the middle. Then they do another 12 Ks at 4%. So favourite for the stages, sort of favourites we had was Baggioli, Andres Krohn, Magnus Cort, Michael Matthews, maybe Dainese. Likely that Jakobsen would get dropped on that climb. And yeah, we had a pretty big fight for the break in that climb where Cort was allowed to go in it once again, Benji. He must just be a master of it, just being able to get in these breaks, or on the climb, is there not really much you can do?
I think it's a combination of both things. Obviously, he is skilled at it. We've seen him do it quite a bit of times now. Next to that, which team is he up against? Let's first say the most obvious sprint team here, the Koenig. They have to make sure that Jakobsen tries to survive the climb in the first place, so they can never pace behind the breakaway, because they need to make sure that the tempo is low enough for them to stay with Jakobsen and then try and bring him back. And then you've got the next two riders in line, like a Dainese and so forth. Same story. They have to have their entire team try and get Dainese over the climb, or put someone else on the breakaway of their team themselves. And then you get to the teams like a Bike Exchange for Matthews. That's a team that I think could have done more this stage in preventing Cort from being in the breakaway, or making sure that whenever Cort is in the break, get Matthews in the break as well. But the breakaway formed with, it was step by step that it formed. It wasn't initially that just one group exploded at the front and it was one group. Just a few people bridging there, and we had a pretty big group, including Magnus Cort, like you said, but he had a teammate as well, Lawson Craddock, and I think that's a very important factor on this stage. And other riders in that group did not have that. Like Krohn was in there as well, Baggioli was in there as well, Rui Oliveira, Quinn Simmons. We had the likes of Podden in the break as well, Anthony Roux, Nico Denz, Tuze, Soto, and I think those were the names of the ones that were the most notable names in my eyes when I saw the breakaway form. And we saw that in that breakaway, there's like one rider of DSM, Nico Denz, and in the peloton, we see that Jakobsen is dropping, but Dainese is not dropping. And we start noticing that DSM starts spacing in the peloton to try and keep the tempo up behind this breakaway. Do you think that it's a mistake not giving Denz a chance, or do you think that they should focus on Dainese on this stage if he's over the climb?
I think focusing on Dainese, if he gets over the climb, is perfectly rational strategy. Yeah. He's probably the quickest sprinter left in that group. The problem is their strongest rouleurs in the break, Nico Denz. Yep. And I'm not sure, I didn't really see him cooperating too much with the breakaway, but he was sandbagging a little bit on it, which disrupted it. They were keeping the gap so tight, DSM, at 1:30, but they're keeping it tight with Storer, Bardet, who've just gone full yesterday, Chris Hamilton, Clymer. They're not, even with the breakaway started messing around with like 60 Ks to go. I think because it was too big a group. We had riders sitting on. We had, I think, Stannard from Bike Exchange, who was working actually. He's quite fast in this sort of finish as well. But with a gap of 1:30, the break started to attack itself, like really dysfunctional. Oliveira attacking, which is a little bit strange because he had Polance in the group, and I was like, but you're quite quick. Why wouldn't you want it to be a sprint? Other riders attacking, Simmons, etc. And the gap wasn't going down too much. It was still like, it even went up to 1:30 with DSM pulling. And I was like, well, that's no good. And then the breakaway had to basically form on it got to like 30 Ks to go. The gap was down to like 30 seconds. And there's this short, shallow gradient, 3 to 4 kilometer climb before the intermediate sprint point where Simmons attacked on that rise because they're about to get caught by Bike Exchange now pacing, with DSM having kept that gap tight for them. Bike Exchange pacing at 50 seconds, bringing it down to 30. Cort, Craddock, Krohn, Anthony Roux, join Oliveira and Simmons, as well as Andrea Baggioli. They've gotten rid of the deadwood. Den's got called back to pace for DSM after he'd been in the break. Stannard as well. Both those guys are looking a bit tired. And so after that, on that crest, we now had guys fully committed to go for the final. And on the front, Benji, trying to avoid the mistakes of the other day, Bike Exchange put Schultz, Howson, and forget another rider, but they kept back a couple because they wanted to make sure Mezgec was protected for the lead out for Matthews. It was a lead out that would never come because, were you surprised by how good the cooperation was in the last 25 from the breakaway group with two stage winner Magnus Cort in the group?
I'm not, because while Cort is there, the others will have to cooperate if they want to have this breakaway succeed. They're riders with no one behind that can also do this type of sprint. So, on paper, if it would go to a sprint, they wouldn't have riders behind that would do it better than their chance in the breakaway. Like a Kroon and so forth, they're willing to bet it here. And the gap is not large enough to be able to try and play with it, to try and go for an attack left and right. So they had to work on working together, otherwise they would not make it till the line. And that's the beauty of this breakaway, because the tension of the peloton and the breakaway being so close, the gap was like half a minute for at least 20 kilometers. Well, the break has to work together, otherwise they get caught and they can't attack, because then they have a smaller chance of winning as well. So the best chance of winning was cooperating with a Magnus Cort, who is honestly having a better chance of winning than any of the other breakaway riders. Although there's riders in there with a significant sprint, but the difference is that they have a sprint in a reduced bunch, and here's group. Cort has a sprint in a proper sprint. And that's the difference between two types of sprints, and the fact that Craddock is still there and is able to set the pace so much harder than anyone else in the breakaway, because he's the one that doesn't need to keep any energy behind, or at least a tiny bit perhaps for the last kilometer. Well, that has such an influence on the ability of this breakaway to potentially succeed at the end. And it came to the point where the gap was going down to 15 seconds, and then it went up again. 17 seconds, 20 seconds, 22 seconds. This one in the last 5-ish kilometers already. And was there any attack of anybody in the last 2 kilometers?
No. You know what I think happened once again? Cort did the rope-a-dope. This is what he did. He does at the end of stages. He conserves. They keep the gap tight because, as Benji's just explained, that pressure of the peloton means you can't attack, so you have to work. And then with the peloton close and now accelerating, he also has something, and he starts doing longer pulls, harder pulls. He'd not actually been pulling that much when everyone was attacking with 60 Ks to go. He was actually sitting in pretty relaxed. And now they've got 20 Ks to go. He and Craddock are just absolutely pinning it. And yeah, that's why no one can attack except Benji. I will say, once it got to 3 Ks to go, the gap was still 30 seconds. DSM had taken way too long to come back to the front, probably because they were cooked, because when they pulled, it went from 30 to 36 seconds. Bike Exchange ran out of gas. 3 Ks to go, we see Jumbo Visma on the front. They enter the town with all the corners, 30-second gap. That's the time where you got to risk it for the biscuit, because you're probably not getting caught by the peloton at that point. And if you're Kroon, I think the young guys probably overestimated their capacity in the sprint against Cort. I think Simmons, Baggioli, Kroon were like, nah, we can take him. I reckon I can, if I get it right, I can take him, but you really can't.
Yeah, I think that you're right in that aspect, because we've got riders in that front group. Except for Craddock, every single one of those riders has shown at least once that they have sprinting capabilities. Kroon in that reduced breakaway in Catalunya, where he beat the rest of the group. Then we have Anthony Roux, who I think sprinted well in a reduced group after, was it San Sebastian or Lombardia? Then we've got Baggioli, who we know that has a decent sprint, was second, I think, after Cort the other day. And we look at Simmons, who was doing a proper sprint at Tour de Wallonie. Then we have Rui Oliveira, who's doing lead-outs and has shown that he's got a good sprint. So they all got a bit of a sprint, and I think they overestimated their ability against Cort or underestimated his ability right here. And in the end, it's a thing that you had to choose. You have to choose whether you want to risk attacking, knowing that Craddock is still there and can just pace you down most of the time, or risk it in the sprint. And I think the odds in both would be quite similar.
And I think the problem is what Benji just mentioned is Lawson Craddock, where he does an incredible lead out in the last 2 kilometers, and he brings Cort to like 400 meters to go. So as Benji said, if you attack in with a K to go, Kranic is going to probably just chase you down and burn himself. And, Anthony Roux, Benji, he won a Vuelta stage in 2009, a sort of hilly transition stage where he beat William Bonnet and Greipel Daniele Benatti 12 years ago. So he probably he's like, listen, I don't have the engine to attack. Let's see if I can get a top 3 in the sprint anyway. So that's what we saw. Crow and I did expect to actually have a dig, but it was the perfect combination of guys who trusted their sprint but weren't as good as Cort, peloton pressuring behind. Quinn Simmons opens up with 250, 300 meters to go. Before that, no one seems interested in getting on Cort's wheel. This is another problem I have. Cort's sitting at the back of the group. I'm like, guys, this is the man who make him jump early. It's almost like when everyone lets Alaphilippe and Pogacar go at the back in Liège. And yeah, he eventually slides up into the corner onto Simmons' wheel. Simmons then opens up way too early, gives Cort a perfect lead out, has either side of the road to choose from, goes left, and when you see the camera changed angle, but I was already saying it's done. If he's not boxed in, Cort has this, and he certainly did. Beating Rui Oliveira, who'd actually spent a lot in the stage, who had been on Cort's wheel, though, to Oliveira's credit, and that shows if you're on his wheel, came second. Simmons, strong sprint, but started it too early. I'd like to have seen what he could do from Cort's wheel third, Baggioli fourth, Roux fifth, and Andreas Krohn sixth. Lawson Kranic 5 seconds behind. You could see him celebrating as he crossed the line. Dainese wins the reduced bunch kick behind with Trent in 9th, Krieger 10th. So, yeah, DSM, they tried today, but I think the problem was A, letting Cort in the break, B, having Dens in the break, then being like, we don't actually trust Dens in the break, drop back and pace. And, they're the problems, really.
I think a few things to note is that earlier on I said that the riders in the breakaway didn't have a potential sprinter in the back group. That's actually not right with Roux and Oliveira. Oliveira had Trentin. Obviously, we know what we feel about Trentin when it comes to a flat sprint, but it seems like they trusted Oliveira more than
I would trust Oliveira
on Trentin's sprints. Me too, but it's still against Magnus Cort. So it's the same guy that Trentin lost to while having lead out of Oliveira back in the day. So it's kind of the same odds here. But when it comes to Roux and Demar being in the second group, actually, I'm surprised that despite Demar's form recently in this Vuelta, that they chose to give Roux that chance instead of pacing behind with Demar. We see that in the group behind. We have Demar finishing 6th or 7th in that sprint, but then again, it's not a sprint for victory, so it doesn't really matter. Legac was in that same group. We have Ludvigsen and Genietz dropping in the final 5 kilometers to 10 kilometers. So potentially they dropped because they didn't need to work anymore at that point. So
and Roux wasn't just sitting on; he was pulling.
Yeah. So what if they played it differently and had Legac pace and Ludvigsen and Genietz pace in the peloton as well?
Mate, the team morale. Imagine they make Roux back off the breakaway wins, or worse, they catch the breakaway and then Dainese destroys Demar, and Demar comes like 7th in the sprint. The bus wouldn't be worth being on there.
Yeah, but it does show that the confidence in Demar is less than in the past.
100%. If this was Giro 2020, they would have chased that. All no 100%. Questions asked. Other things to note from this stage, GC unchanged except for the unfortunate news that Louis Meintjes, just a nothing crash during this stage when Bex took over, seemed unrelated to that, pacing with like 40 Ks, 45 Ks to go, maybe a bit later. He crashed and DNF'd, and I don't know what exactly he's injured. It did look a pretty hard crash, and that's a real shame. This guy's on a 1-year deal at Intermarché. He looked to have pretty much locked up the top 10 in the Vuelta a España. You'll remember Louis Meintjes, he sort of came onto the scene with 2 8ths on GC in the Tour de France in 2016 and 17. Since then, he hasn't won a race since 2015. His Grand Tour results since then since 2017 have been DNF 58th, 51, 36, 14th at the Tour, and now crashed out of the Vuelta. This was certainly a comeback for him in terms of particularly just mixing it up on Gamonetero yesterday. It's just huge for him, and to crash out like this is a real shame. Despite that, Benji, if you're a team, I'd sign him for 200, 250K next year. I still would.
If I'm him, I'll try and re-sign at Intermarché because they clearly want him to try to go for GC, which is what he wanted to do. So yeah, you're right. If I'm a team, then I do see value in him. But yeah,
he
I
doesn't
don't
win
know.
much. It's only if a top 10 at a Grand Tour is valuable to you. But he is a guy
Exactly.
who knows how to go for a top 10 in GC. The way he rode this Vuelta
I don't think he would have won it, the top 10. I think that De La Cruz has a better time trial, would have overtaken him in the end.
Where was he before today?
20 seconds ahead of De La Cruz.
Oh, I think Guillaume Martin. I think he beats Guillaume Martin. I think he drops out.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. Time trial of Guillaume Martin.
No, that's what I was counting on.
You're right. 100%.
I mean, if you want a guy, who'll go all in and dedicate training and obviously then have the team ride for him on 10th on GC at a Grand Tour, and that's worth something to you, he is a guy worth signing. Good to see him back. It's a shame he's crashed out. Just wanted to make that note. Otherwise, stage 20 tomorrow is not a straightforward sprint stage or any straightforward stage, to be honest. I'm not sure how much climbing there is in it, but it's 203 Ks long. I think it might be over 4,000 meters of climbing. Middle of the first third of the stage is like rolling 5K, 6Ks, 5%, 5Ks, 4%, then shorter 2K, 6%, then a rolling valley, then another series of longer climbs, 7Ks, 5%, 6K, 6%, 10K, 6.1%, with 5.6K to 7.6% descent, short valley, 1K, 10% as part of 5K, 6.2%, 2K, 6%, and then it finishes on, I'm trying to look at the numbers, 10K is 5%, but it's a fake news climb, I believe, this finish. I'm trying to look at it on the Castro de Ervil. It's got a steep, it looks like Roglic if they go to the finish, perfect for him, like 5% finish. Perfect sort of Basque raid style stage. What do you think happens?
I'm expecting Ineos to do something, because we know that Bernal doesn't give a crap about being 5th or 10th. That's what he says, at least, and he seems to have shown that on the Covadonga stage as well. I think he's going to try that again or something similar if he has the energy for it. It is not the stage where I would have said Bernal, knowing that Roglic is here, but he would be able to, for example, let's take a look at the climbs that are on this parkour. Which one does suit an attack? They're all roughly 6%. Are there any ones in there that have very steep percentages somewhere? The Mugas has a 9% kilometer in
Prado.
The middle, so that's an option. Prado as well with that steep part, 10%. But is Prado not too close to the finish line to make a move for Bernal to try and move up into the top 5?
True. I was more thinking just go for a stage win, because Ineos don't have anything out of this Vuelta so far. I mean, there's a 4K 7% section on the Mabia climb, I think. So that's, I guess, quite steep. I think, I don't know, it's a chance. There's 5K 7.6%. I was looking for this stage at guys who do well at La Guelia, San Sebastian, Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and Basque Country. So Hague, pretty good at Andalusia, those sort of stages. Bernal, second at La Guelia this year. Mauri van Sevenant should go well on this stage. Roglic obviously should go well, but it's got a bit of Paris stage 8 to it, Benji. I think they'll be nervous before this stage because, as you said, Pidcock, Sivakov, Van Baal, if you get Van Baal up the road maybe, can definitely do some damage on these climbs, and he will need his domestiques to be really, really on. What about Bahrain, Benji, who I think have the best team for this stage, personally, because Hague, this is Hague's sort of stage. If he wanted to actually try a dash for glory to get on the podium, he's not good on the 15K 10%ers, but this sort of 9K 6% long endurance stage with Caruso, Tratnik, Padun looking a bit better, Poles, Maida. Do you think they try even with Maida, Benji? Do they let Maida go on Prado and see if anyone chases?
I don't know. Would they? Let's take a look at GC, who would be closest to that, and whether that would have an effect on who chases him. He's ahead of Guillaume Martin, but Cofidis has shown that they're going to be pacing at any point whenever whoever is ahead.
Grosjean will try tomorrow.
I feel like the stage does fit him, but would he try from the breakaway? Because then he could try and move up into the top 10 while going just for the stage itself won't allow that to happen. I think Eiking should go in the breakaway to try and save that top 10 that Meinkies hoped he would get. And do you think that a De La Cruz and so forth are too far in GC to get in the breakaway? Only 9 minutes?
Well, Jumbo wouldn't chase him. De La Cruz, If I'm Jumbo, I would want De La Cruz to go on the break, because then Bahrain and Ineos and Movistar would be like, oh, now we have to sort of chase and keep this in check.
Yep.
I think De La Cruz has won stages of Basque Country. He's won Pyrenees Stage 8. I think he's good on this sort of stage as well. Even better,
With
suits him
Trenton
better.
to keep the tempo up and try to get a breakaway away, stuff like that. Obviously, we've got that initial part of the stage where we've got those hills where breakaways will form. That's the part where the breakaway will most likely form. The question is whether the breakaway will be allowed to continue after that, because that valley section is a place where either they have to continue fighting to try and keep ahead of the peloton, or the peloton says go ahead and the gap opens up to like 6-7 minutes. But considering it's the last mountain stage, I kind of feel like it's going to be a GC day.
It's a real shame Movistar have had so many injuries. If they had Valverde still here in good condition, the current GC position, Verona and Jacobs, they could have done serious damage on this stage, I think, and put Jumbo-Visma under a lot of pressure. I think Jumbo have looked good on the steadier climbs, but I think this is a more complicated stage, and it's up and down all day. It's very long. It would have been interesting to see what they could have done. But I'm hopeful for tomorrow's stage. Who do you think takes it out, Benji?
Jesus Christ, this is a difficult one. I think that... damn it.
Roman
You
Bardet.
go ahead.
Roman Bardet.
Bardet?
Yeah.
Okay.
He wants that Com jersey. He's got to get in the break, mate. The Com jersey, you got to take it back.
I'm going to go for De La Cruz. And
good
I'm going to do it because he got away even from the GC group yesterday. So even if worst case scenario with the peloton, he still has an opportunity of at least, 5%, 2%. So worth it to name him, I guess.
Who's come up penniless from this Vuelta so far? I would say Bora Hansgrohe, Großschartner has to try. Astana Premier Tech really have to try tomorrow with the Izagirre brothers. The Spanish Pro Conti teams as well. Van Sevenant and Knox really, really should be trying to get the break tomorrow as well. So there will be a big fight for the break. I'm trying to think. Schultz on Bike Exchange, we had to work today, as well as Trek Segafredo. One would think Brambilla will certainly be trying to get in the break with JP Lopez, and so it could be a really good fight in the break. But a lot of the teams we've been already seeing, and hopefully we see some GC action before the final TT. But let us know what you think is going to happen down below. Magnus Cort takes his third Vuelta a España stage win, now officially the most Grand Tour stage wins for any Danish rider in history. Thanks to Le Col for supporting the podcast. We'll see you with the recap tomorrow. Ciao.